This is Casey Hunt and Rachel Ball from Region 18. Our topic is the importance of speech, language, and hearing screenings in early childhood. So the importance of screening in early childhood can apply to anybody. It doesn't matter what language you speak, it doesn't matter where you live, because all cultures have speech, language, and hearing related needs. So this doesn't just apply to a certain group, this can apply to any culture. So before you can know if there's an issue or if you need to be screened for these things, you need to know what they are. So speech is what we use to express our thoughts and feelings. It's basically the words that come out of our mouth that we use to communicate with others. Language is how we use those words. It's like the rules and systems of how we use our words. And then hearing is just the way that the brain perceives the sounds that we hear. So you know what those are, and so now we need to know, when is there a problem? So if your child has trouble making certain sounds, if your child is stuttering, or if they have voice problems, then there might be a speech issue. If your child has difficulty finding the words that they need to say, if it seems like they don't know the meanings of certain words, then it could be a language problem. If it seems like your child has inattention, if they are having difficulties learning, or even if there's like a lack of response, like if they're watching TV and you say their name and it seems like they don't hear you, might be a sign that you need to have their hearing checked. So we've learned what those three things are. We've learned when there's a problem, so what's next? If you think those things are not developing correctly, what do you do? The CDC has developmental checklists available in both Spanish and English for your children from anywhere from 2 months old through 5 years old. So these problems don't start when they reach school age years. These problems can start even when they're infants. And you can get these from your pediatrician. They're available through the CDC. And there's also an app that you can download on your phone to help track those milestones, so you have a general idea if your child is meeting those, if they're ahead, if they're behind, just to give you an idea when you need to seek these screenings. So if you do suspect a delay, you could contact your child's physician or even your local school, and you may be able to get free or low-cost services for your child. Through your school, let's start between birth and 3, there's free services, and then once your child turns 3, they can start receiving those services through the school. And yeah, you could wait until your child starts school, but
the earlier, the better.
The better.
So when it comes to hearing, the earlier a hearing problem is detected, the better, because your child can have trouble acquiring speech and language skills if their hearing is impaired, or they may demonstrate poor academic performance. They may show difficulty with personal social adjustments or even emotional difficulty. So these are all things that we want to address hearing issues earlier rather than later to avoid these situations. And then when it comes to speech, if your child has speech sound errors, then they're not making sounds the right way, and that can affect how your child is understood by others. If they're stuttering, then your child could become frustrated that they cannot communicate easily. Or if they have voice issues, then they would have a scratchy, hoarse, breathy, or nasal vocal quality, and that's not normal. So again, these are all things that we would want to address earlier rather than later. And then when it comes to language, if a child does not understand language, then that affects their ability to follow directions, which, as we all know, that's a major issue. We need children to be able to understand and follow directions. And then not understanding the meaning of words interferes with conversation and learning. So we'd rather address these things earlier rather than later so that they don't get behind in their learning process as they get older. And then it can also be difficult to communicate thoughts and partake in appropriate social skills and play if the child doesn't know words or know how to use them and how to use them together. So again, we would rather address these issues earlier rather than later to help the child in the long run. A fun fact, research suggests that the first 6 months of life are the most crucial for development of language skills. So oftentimes people think that language and communication isn't developed until later, like once they start seeing the child show communication skills, like through speech and whatnot, but that's actually not true. The first 6 months of life, the child is already starting to understand how different communication styles work and how they help to meet their needs. So that's why it's super important for us to be aware of this and address these issues as soon as possible. Okay, so when it comes to speech, language, and hearing screenings and evaluations, basically a screening happens first, and that helps to determine if a full evaluation is needed. So for speech and language, either the teacher or a parent can notice these issues and bring it to the proper person's attention. And then when it comes to the screening for those things, teachers, parents, or speech language pathologist assistants can perform the screenings. SLPs can too, but they're more so involved in the actual full evaluation for speech and language. And then when it comes to hearing, the physician, SLP, school nurse, or audiologist can perform a hearing screening. And then if more information is needed, then a full evaluation may be warranted, and that would be done by an audiologist. So here are some things from other experts outside of the field of speech language pathology. A Georgia pediatrician said, the earlier developmental delays are detected and intervention begins, the greater the chance a young child has of achieving his or her best potential. So that's from a pediatrician's perspective, and it further reiterates the importance of detecting and intervening as soon as possible. Intervention is likely to be more effective if it is provided earlier in life rather than later. And the connections in a baby's brain are most adaptable in the first 3 years of life. So these connections are called neural circuits, and they are the foundation for learning, behavior, and health. And over time, these connections become harder to change. So again, that further reiterates, we would rather address these earlier rather than later so that we can have a greater impact. And lastly, a Pennsylvania clinical psychologist said, acting early can help a child communicate, play, and learn from the world now and for the future. It also can prevent frustration, which is so common in children with communication difficulties, from turning into more difficult behaviors. So these children can become really, really frustrated if they are unable to communicate and play and learn like their peers are able to. And that can turn into like aggressive behaviors, and we don't want that. So it's really, really important to prevent this type of frustration by addressing the underlying issues beforehand. So the bottom line is early screening and identification are imperative to a child's overall development and learning. And here are our sources. Thank you.